And welcome back to the First and Goal podcast. My name is Lewis, and next to me, as always, my beautiful co-host Laraib, as we are super excited to break down one of the best weeks of football we've had in a long time. Week 13 of the NFL season. So many great matchups to get into, crazy outcomes, just a wild week in general. A lot of the playoff picture is starting to get rounded out now, and some very interesting storylines to get into to go into the rest of the season, Laraib. What did you just think in general of the week we just had?
Oh, it was a great week. Some big injuries and some teams really coming into the threshold. Lewis, I really liked how the Bengals played. I know you and I really liked them more than the Ravens. And now with this Lamar injury, we'll talk about that in a little bit. It's just the picture is starting to get a little bit more clearer and clearer every week. I know that the Giants and the Commanders tied, so that throws a kink into everything. But Lewis, let's just quickly go into our picks from this week. Another tie. I mean, I don't think we've had as many ties as we had in this season as we've had in the rest of the seasons combined, Lewis. And so, the big one really was Miami and San Francisco. I thought Miami could pull off the upset, and Tennessee and Philadelphia, which you had Philadelphia in that one. And so another close one, Lewis. I think we're still tied overall for the whole season. And so, these coming weeks is going to be really, really tight going down the stretch for our picks.
Yeah, I'll say for that Tennessee Philly game, I mean, it looked like it was a blowout, but Treylon Burks has been really impressing me as a rookie this season. It seems like he's really starting to come into his own in this offense. But you could tell when he left the game, it left a huge hole in that offense and how they were able to move the ball and really push it down the field. So the loss of him in that offense really just kind of deflated their entire game plan, and Philly was able to pounce on that. But AJ Brown bounced back, huge revenge game. Like I said in the pod, just got to give myself a pat on the back for that one. KC is my lock. Honestly, it was just a belief in Kansas City. I didn't feel really good about it. If I could go back, I'd probably change that. I probably would still pick Kansas City, but I would change my lock. And we are also filming this before Monday Night Football, but we both have the Saints. So I said on the pod that Saints were my upset, but I changed it. I got cold feet, and I changed it to New England at the last second,
Woo!
and that turned out in losing me the week. So next time I need to just trust my gut and go with what I know. But Laurent, let's go ahead and move on to our Saints Seahawks corner of the week. Obviously, we were filming this before the Saints game. Nothing to talk about on my end. So let's pivot quickly to your Seattle Seahawks, who pull out a surprisingly close game against the John Wolford-led Los Angeles Rams, Laurent. I know you were sweating during that one. What are your big takeaways? And then do you think, has the NFC shaken up? Are you more confident after that game or less confident of the Seahawks playoff chances?
Well, some takeaways from the game, Lewis. Geno Smith continues on his hot streak. Both Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf go for 140 yards and a touchdown each. So it's great to see the passing game still, going strong 13 weeks in. But what really I took away from this game was when Ken Walker went down, the rushing game was nowhere to be seen. DJ Dallas, he was in there for a little bit, but he also got banged up. And so it was really on Jones Jr. to really put in the work, former Saints player. And so, the rushing attack without Ken Walker out there really, really looked lackluster. And that's something we're going to have to pick up on, especially going into the colder December, January games, to, ground and pound, because that's what our identity's been, Lewis. I know Geno Smith played really well, but when we've been able to get the play action going with Kenneth Walker, that's what we've been the greatest. And then on the defensive side, the Rams are also rushing all over us. With John Wolford, we got a great interception on him. Tariq Woolen tied with the league in picks. And so, the defense, I wish they could get a little bit more pressure. I know we got a couple sacks on Wolford, but it's going to take a lot more than that to beat some of these other teams. We got the Chiefs coming up in a couple weeks. And so, I like how we're rounding out. We're back into the playoffs, Lewis, with the tie. It's going to be really tight getting into that 7-6 seed. But, we'll talk about Jimmy G actually in our next segment. With him going down, we'll see how the NFC West shakes out, like you're asking me. The defense really, really played well for the 49ers against the Dolphins team. And if they continue like that, I still think the 49ers can win that division.
Yeah, I think one of the bigger concerns I've been seeing from the Seahawks squad is the last 2 weeks, the inability to really get that running game going. And like you said, that's been such a huge part of their identity and setting up play action, getting Geno Smith out of the pocket, getting him comfortable within the offense. So, if Kenneth Walker's out, hopefully he gets back soon, and it doesn't seem too serious of an injury. But you're going to need him down in the stretch, because if you're starting running backs for Tony Jones Jr. and DJ Dallas, that's just simply not going to cut it against some of these better defenses, like you said, going into the colder months when you need to rely on your running game. So I think this is a very, telling stretch of what the Seahawks are going through. They pull out the win, and yeah, it wasn't pretty, but it was a divisional game on the road. You'll always take those wins no matter who was on the field. So, and then, why not get into it now? The division may still be open for the Seahawks as Jimmy G and the 49ers. Yes, they pull out a very impressive win against the Dolphins, but the biggest storyline from the game, unfortunately for 49ers fans, is the loss of Jimmy Garoppolo for the rest of the season. Jimmy Garoppolo injuring his ankle early in the first quarter, out for the game. Brock Purdy, the backup quarterback, Mr. Irrelevant from last year, the last pick in the NFL draft, comes in and he plays pretty well, to get them the win in San Francisco. But losing Jimmy Garoppolo is a huge deal for the 49ers just because he's been in this offense for so long. He's beloved by the locker room. All those guys have faith in him. And me and you both agree, he's not a top 15 quarterback in the NFL, but he's consistent. He is familiar with the Shanahan system, and you kind of know what you're going to get with him. He's not going to lose you a game, but he's also not going to put the team on his back and win a game like a Mahomes or Allen or Burrow can. So I think, this is a huge moment for the 49ers. And are they going to pivot and try to find someone else in the market? Are they going to try to stick with Brock Purdy and just ride out the rest of the season with him? I think if there's any offense in the NFL that a quarterback does, losing your starting quarterback is not that big of a deal, it is the 49ers, just because of all the playmakers around them and the system in which they play in. The Shanahan system is very, you don't need a great quarterback to succeed in that system. So I think this is a situation in which you can be confident with Brock Purdy as your starter because of how great this defense is. And you have a first-team All-Pro left tackle, first-team All-Pro running back, wide receiver. You just have studs all over the field that you should be fine. But, Laraib, what do you think the 49ers should look to do now with the loss of Jimmy Garoppolo?
I definitely agree, Lewis, that they stick with Purdy. Baker Mayfield is set to be released by the Carolina Panthers. I definitely don't think they go after somebody like that. When you've had Purdy in, you said he was Mr. Irrelevant. He's definitely Mr. Relevant now going into the system. And, like you said, Shanahan designed the system around Garoppolo, who's not the best guy. And it's not that complicated, Lewis. If Brock Purdy can go in there and be a game manager, right? Like we've seen Alex Smith, like he did for the Chiefs, just somebody who can get the ball to guys like Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce. Now just dump the ball off to McCaffrey, Kittle, and Debo and let them work. The system is not designed for deep balls, back shoulder passes. It's just getting the ball into the playmaker's hands. And now this guy, Lewis, who did have an offer scholarship from Nick Saban, and turned it down. This is that type of caliber player. Whatever you can say about him coming out of college or whatever, Mr. Irrelevant, he had a scholarship from Nick Saban. That's all I can say. And so just get the ball to the playmaker's hands. You have an outstanding defense, Lewis, who just shut down the Miami Dolphins on offense. So let's pivot over to the Dolphins team a little bit. We said it was going to be the matchup of the head coaches, and Kyle Shanahan came out on top on this one. He knew exactly what Mike McDaniel was going to try to do on offense with Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, and he just shut those guys down completely. And, you see Mike McDaniel on the sideline saying, I effed up to his players. And so it's good for him to take accountability on that. But Kyle Shanahan really knew what he was doing in this game at home. And for a Dolphins team, which had a really easy schedule the past couple of weeks with Tua back, this does not look good for them when you're on the road against you think an even level opponent as them, at least offense versus defense, and you just get completely, just run over by that defense led by DeMeco Ryans. So what do you have to say about that for the Dolphins, at least?
I say from the Dolphins perspective, this is definitely a game in which, your eyes open up to, is this offense maybe more limited than we thought? And Tua has been playing like an amazing quarterback when he's been starting and healthy, and he's, best quarterback rating in the league, yada, yada, yada. But when he's been healthy, since he came back, after that game against the Vikings, here are the teams he's played against. Against the Steelers, they only put up 16 points, and there were a lot of interceptions dropped. And then you play defenses as the Lions, the Bears, the Browns, and the Texans. So it's hard to gauge where Tua is as a quarterback right now, given what he's done this season. his most impressive win, that comeback against the Ravens, if the Ravens just don't screw themselves, that's a disappointing loss. And then, yes, you also beat the Bills at home, but that was a weird, finicky game. So you can say he finds a way to win, but this is a game you don't have, your starting tackles and Teron Armstead, and they were sorely missed. He was just under pressure, missing guys a lot. He looked rattled in this game. And another big, thing for me was this defense was getting kind of, Brock Purdy comes in and he's not, yes, he's been with this offense and he's, familiar, but this is a Dolphin defense that we had a bit more faith in, but they really did not play up to the task. And they haven't been that great against the run all season. We saw what the Bears did against them. The Lions ran all over them. And I have some questions for this team going into the stretch of the playoffs. December football, this is a Dolphins team that can't run the ball efficiently, and they can't defend against the run that efficiently. So those are huge things in these cold weather games in which you have a game at Buffalo coming up. You have an at New England coming up. So those are games in which you need to be able to run the ball because you cannot rely on Tua, who, let's face it, he's a small, frail quarterback, injury prone. Yes, he's accurate. Yes, he can put the ball and just get it to the playmakers, which is like a huge trait of a quarterback, but he doesn't have that elite athleticism to really put you over the edge. And you can't he's not the type of Kyler Murray who can just zig out of things and leave the pocket. And in today's NFL, you need that from your quarterbacks if you want to, pick up these crucial first downs like we saw Joe Burrow against the Chiefs. It's just, I don't have faith in him to pull out games like this, and when he's playing a good defense in December and January, when you need that win. I just don't think he's the quarterback for the future. I know I'm being very critical right now, and he still has a lot of the season left to prove me wrong. He plays the Chargers next week. I bet he has a great game because of how pathetic the Chargers have been. And people will be right back on his bandwagon. I think he's a fine quarterback. I think he's around the 15 to 18 top, in terms of the rankings of quarterbacks. He's around that 15 to 18 mark in quarterbacks in the league, where on some days he can play as one of the best, and on some days you get a performance like this. So I think that's what's kind of holding this Dolphins team back, and their schedule going forward is tough. I think this is a team this is a make it or break it game against the Chargers next week. If they can't win this game against the Chargers, it might be a loser leaves town match because we know the Chargers are going to be desperate, and they have a lot to prove against the Dolphins. So that's going to be a very pivotal game for their season, Laraib.
Well, Lewis, one thing you can say, this will be the hardest task to have on against defense all year long, right? The 49ers are the number one ranked defense in the whole league. And so if you can learn something from this,
that's fair.
Right. If you can learn something from like this, like you mentioned, he had pressure in his face all game long. The accurate Tua that we've seen all season disappeared in this one when you guys like Fred Warner, Nick Bosa, with their hands in your face all game. So if they can learn something from this, right, get the ball out quicker, because you they really like those deep crossers, right? Those deep plays to Tyreek Hill. They were able to get a touchdown, one of those in this game. A little too late on that one. And so trying to figure out, Mike McDaniels is a smart guy. He's been in the Shanahan system where, they've gotten the ball out quick. And so let's see if he can pivot to something like that. And we can see where this Dolphins team can go from there, Lewis. And I know from last week, I said, I really like the Dolphins to win their division. And now with the loss, embarrassing loss like this, they still have to play the Bills one more time, but they've lost the lead in the division. And now, they're sitting at the 6th seed in the AFC. And so we'll see how that pans out from there, Lewis. But a lot of questions moving forward from this Dolphins team. But let's move on to another big game from this week. We had the Cincinnati Bengals going up the Kansas City Chiefs, Lewis. What did you like about what the Bengals did in this game to beat the Chiefs?
I just think it was a Joe Burrow masterclass. And yes, his numbers weren't extremely gaudy. He didn't make any spectacular throws. He made some very good throws, but it was just staying cool, staying collected. They were up in this game. They blew a lead. They were down in this game. And he just finds a way to right the ship and get everything going. And the way they executed in that late game stretch, in which that if Patrick Mahomes has anything more than 13 seconds left on the clock, or 12 seconds, I should say, he'll find a way to win a game. So in order to just perfectly execute in a situation, end of the game, you have the ball and you're up. So all you got to do is take care of the ball and run out the clock and you're golden. And he just finds ways to win. It was so impressive. And there were a lot of things that went in Kansas City's favor in this game, or excuse me, more Bengals misfortune. Tyler Boyd drops a touchdown. They run this stupid gimmick play on 4th and 1 in the red zone, in which if you just quarterback sneak, you're probably getting it with Joe Burrow, but they hand off in some stupid sweep to Trent Taylor,
And
it
right,
gets
that's the second time we've
blown
seen
up.
that, Lewis.
Yeah. And that's just one of those things where it's like, Zach Taylor, what are we doing right now? So there were a lot of missed opportunities for the Bengals in this game. And I came away from this game, Laraib, saying that I think the Bengals are the better team overall than the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, yes, the Chiefs, they missed a field goal in this game. And, Travis Kelce fumbles, and that's real rare for him. But there were missed opportunities on both sides. So if this game was played in Kansas City, I would give Kansas City a 3-point edge, like I'd give Cincinnati a 3-point edge. I think neutral field, these teams are almost these identical in how competent they are. And I am very high on the Chiefs this year. So that's saying something for them. But, the Bengals ripping off 4 straight wins in a row. And when we look at this big picture now, Laraib, I'll swing this back to you in a second. Whenever we look at the AFC North, last week we both said on here that we didn't think the Bengals could win this division, but we still thought they were a better team than the Ravens. It was just because the Ravens' schedule was so easy and the Bengals have a super tough schedule going forward that we thought they would trip up once or twice. And as long as the Ravens beat the scrubs they're playing against, then they'd be fine. But that's quite the opposite, Laura, because, the Ravens just lost Lamar, and we don't know how long exactly he's going to be out for, and he might come back next week. Who knows? But this is, even with Lamar, this offense has not been looking sharp, and that was a game they got out by the skin of their teeth against the Broncos last week. So I'd be distressed if I was a Ravens fan. Yes, they have an easy schedule going forward, but all of a sudden, they're not that good of a team. And these other teams are looking at the Ravens like this is a winnable game. So there is a lot of concern for Ravens. And meanwhile, the Bengals, you just beat the best team in the NFL that we both had a consensus in our top 5 teams last week as the best team in the NFL. So now you look at these other games and yes, you're playing against the Browns, the Bucks, Patriots, Bills, and the Ravens, but flip that coin around. They have to play you, and you are one of the best teams in the NFL. So as it stands right now, I still have, my AFC power rankings, I guess you could say. I think I would have the Bengals as the second best team in the NFL or in the AFC, maybe behind the Bills. You can make an argument for Bills. I still have KC 1 just because I trust them. And if that game is in Kansas City, the Chiefs win it. But the Bengals are starting to figure things out, and they're a very dangerous team, Laraib.
Yeah, Lewis, I think it's safe to say that Joe Burrow is now the Mahomes killer. Joe Shiesty, he's cool in any situation, and he got it done against the Chiefs. Like you mentioned, they're up big, then they go down, and he's still able to get it all done. So that was just great to see. I know you've been really high on this team all season long, talking about the chemistry with the O-line just needs to get better every week. And, they've been picking it up the past couple weeks.
They played very well.
So credit to you. Even without Joe Mixon out there, I know I have him on my fantasy team, but Samaje Perine goes out there. He does a good job as a replacement for him. And so, like you mentioned, you really like the trajectory of this team. Like you said, they play the Browns and the Bucks, but those teams have been faltering. Lewis, I know the Bucks played tonight, but the Browns with Deshaun Watson did not look good at all. It was that defense who really got it done for them. And for the Bucks, we'll see how Tom Brady plays tonight, but he has not been playing, good all season long. And so, realistically, this AFC division, AFC East division is wide open for this Bengals team. And with this Lamar injury, even with Lamar in there, like you said, this offense has just been anemic, Lewis. Mark Andrews is one of those guys you'd think you could cover up those blemishes at wide receiver. But with guys like Rashad Bateman out for the rest of the season and Demarcus Robinson filling in, this offense really, really has looked anemic when the rushing attack has not been good either. And Lamar, talk about a blunder with him. We said earlier in the season about his contract, what type the Ravens were messing up about it. All this and that, and now he's injured. And so, we'll see how this situation goes from here, Lewis. It's going to be really interesting to see how that pans out. And, I'm really, really curious on how this division pans out. With the Steelers, they've racked up a couple wins, Lewis. Maybe they're not out of it just yet. Mike Tomlin, he's cursing out fans on his way out of the tunnel, telling them that, he's effing working. And so, he's
effing working, baby.
He's trying to get into the playoffs too, Lewis. And so I'm really excited for this division for the rest of the season.
Yeah, I wanted to say about the Lamar contract situation. The Ravens might be right. And I'm not saying this is quite an indictment on Lamar, but in 2 straight seasons, he's sustained pretty serious injuries. But there should be an indictment on the Ravens in the sense of every team in the NFL, every decent, team has a go-to playmaker of some sorts who you can rely on a third and down or a key situation you need to get the ball to your playmaker. And Mark Andrews, yes, he's a good tight end, but he's not quite the separator or the receiver that Kelsey is, in a sense to where if you focus 3 defenders on Mark Andrews, you can take him out of a game pretty easily. So then it's, well, who else is there on the Ravens? They don't have another playmaker that you can trust. And that's kind of why I feel bad for Lamar this season, that it seems like he's been put in a situation to fail almost once you lose Rashad Bateman, who we didn't even think was that guy going into the season. He's nice, and he had a few good games early on in the season, but at the end of the day, I mean, you need a legitimate weapon. You need an A.J. Brown, a Jamar Chase. You need a Tyreek Hill, a Travis
OBJ.
Kelce. No, not an OBJ. To legitimize yourself as one of the offenses in the NFL that you need to be taken seriously. And without that, and without a solid, running game, their offensive line's been banged up. This is becoming a Ravens team that, in this AFC, we've seen teams late in seasons that just kind of collapse and miss the playoffs. And it's looking like the Ravens might be that team again after, last season, in which they had a promising start and they missed out last year. They might miss it out for a second year in a row because of this offense not being able to figure it out late in the season. So we'll see. This can be a very interesting offseason for the Ravens and the entire AFC North. The Steelers' point is very interesting because they play 2 games against the Ravens coming up, including next week. And that is a game where I like the Steelers in that matchup. They've been playing very good football. Their defense has been playing well. And, their offense has a lot of good pieces on it. Deontay Johnson had a big game. George Pickens is always a threat. And Najee Harris starting to figure things out in the running game. So this is slowly becoming a very dangerous Pittsburgh team that is starting to heat up. And here comes Mike Tomlin. Here comes that winning record that everyone loves to talk about. It's really starting to heat up, and they have an easy schedule ahead as well. So this division is starting to get spicier and spicier, and we haven't even talked about the criminal is back, baby, with the Browns. But we won't talk about.
Well, he played
today.
criminally bad in that game, Lewis.
Yeah. Well, thank God he was playing against Kyle Allen and that criminally bad Texans organization that's waiting for Bryce Young to fall into their lap this coming offseason. So let's move on, Laraib, now to the NFC. And top of the NFC East, the Eagles and the Cowboys look very impressive on Sunday, Laraib. Both picked up huge wins against AFC South opponents. The Eagles, you picked the Titans in that ball game, and they just outplayed them, and they played a very good game against a good Titans team. This is a good Titans team in which the Eagles soundly defeated. And then on the other side of the ball, the Cowboys demolished the Colts. It was a 2-point game, late in the third quarter, and then the Cowboys outscored them 33-0 in the fourth quarter. And that was just an ultimate Matt Ryan collapse, but also this Cowboys team just showing off their firepower and their explosiveness, Laraib. So I think, is it safe to say, Laraib, that these two teams in the NFC are on a collision course for the NFC title game?
Well, Lewis, I think they are. I have to agree with you. You look at some of these other teams in the NFC, like the Vikings, they've had some bad losses. They could have lost this weekend against the Jets. The Buccaneers, who's been on a downward trend. My Seahawks, unfortunately, as good as Geno Smith is, that defense can be exploited. The Commanders and the Giants just tied this past weekend. And so you look at these two teams, just 2 top-tier defenses, 2 experienced quarterbacks. Now, I will give the edge a little bit to Dak Prescott, just because he's been in some of those playoff games and actually won a couple, unlike Jalen Hurts. But what really impressed me from the Eagles this weekend was their passing attack. I said the matchup was really, really good for the Titans on both sides of the ball, right? Because they could stop the stop the rush and be able to rush really well. But against the Eagles, Jalen Hurts just went nuclear with A.J. Brown. I know I said that, Derrick Henry was going to show why A.J. Brown was the number 2 option for the Titans team, but no, A.J. Brown came out to play, man. He was running over guys, catching big touchdowns, and they didn't rely on the run, right, Lewis? Against the Packers, they almost had 400 rushing yards, and this one, Jalen Hurts just puts on a clinic throwing the ball, and so really, really impressive to see them, play on both sides of the coin in that one. And then on the defense, just bottling up Derrick Henry, like I said. They struggle a little bit the past couple of weeks with the rush defense, but being able to stop Derrick Henry, really, really impressive, Lewis. And for this Cowboys team, you face a Jeff Saturday team. You score 33 unanswered points in the fourth quarter, yada, 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 defense. So we'll see, Lewis, these two teams play near Christmas time in Jerry World, and I really, really want to go to that game, Lewis.
Clash of the Titans. It's going to be extremely exciting. But my biggest takeaway was that Cowboys team, it was a 2-point game late in the third quarter against a very underwhelming Colts team. And there was a lot of bad plays by Dak Prescott. You say you trust Dak Prescott more than Jalen Hurts, but you have to recognize what you've seen this season from both quarterbacks. And Jalen Hurts has been playing out of his mind this season. And this Philadelphia Eagles offense, like you said, they're so excellent in finding matchups and exploiting them. Titans have a great run defense, but their pass defense isn't that great. All right, let's air it out and just destroy them. Last week against the Packers, they don't have that great of a rush defense. Well, we're going to jam it down their throats and impose our will on them. This offense is so creative. Nick Sirianni is a guru. He's probably the best coach in the NFL. I would give him my vote for Coach of the Year. Just saying that out loud. But no, I've been very impressed with this Eagles squad. And I think right now I'd definitely give them the edge. And if I'm a Cowboys fan, the way this weekend, kind of shook out, you should be very excited as a Cowboys fan as well. Yes, I don't think they played their best football in that game, despite the score being so lopsided. I just think that was a Matt Ryan collapse and just one of those turnovers. Nothing's going right. And the Cowboys, they're so explosive. They're able to just capitalize on all of these mistakes of the Colts. But I think this is a game in which, I don't know. I don't trust Dak Prescott. He threw a lot of bad passes. He threw like 6 balls that probably should have been picked off. 2 of them were. Gilmore had a great pick, and there was another one. I forget by who. And then you lose your starting cornerback in Anthony Brown, who tore his Achilles in that game as well. So that's a huge loss for them, who he's been playing very well this season. So, obviously prayers up for him. So we'll see how this, shakes out. But with the 49ers, losing Jimmy Garoppolo for the year, I think these two teams are on a collision course for the NFC Championship. Now, the way the seeding works out, they probably won't meet in the NFC Championship. They'll probably meet in the divisional round if they both make it there. But I'm just super excited to see how this thing shakes out and who comes out of this. The Eagles are probably going to win the division, but who comes out of this NFC? I think it's between these two teams, Laraib. Any disagreements?
Yeah, definitely. We could see these two teams, but don't rule out the 49ers just yet, Lewis. That defense, we talk about defense from these two teams, but the number one defense is the 49ers. And like we mentioned earlier, if Brock Purdy can just, play mistake-free like Jimmy Garoppolo has done so far this season, you can see that 49ers team also making it pretty far, Lewis. But let's move on to Thursday night football. We have the Las Vegas Raiders going to Los Angeles to play the Rams, Lewis. Now, the Raiders have been on a sneaky hot streak. Beat the Seahawks 2 weeks ago, and they beat the Chargers this week, Lewis. And now they're going to play a lonely Rams team, which has John Wolford at starting quarterback, no Cooper Kupp. Jalen Ramsey got exposed by DK. Aaron Donald's, probably out for this game. How are you feeling about this Raiders team, rest of the season and more about this game?
I will say I did see a lot from this Rams team. This is a well-coached squad, and this just isn't the type of organization under Sean McVay that's just going to lay over and die. I thought that would be the case based on some of their past performances, but this is a team that's going to keep things competitive, and they're going to play their hearts out, as you saw on Sunday. But I just think, the Raiders have kind of found their bread and butter. They found out how they want to play football, and they've been playing very well these past few weeks. So I think this is a matchup that heavily favors the Raiders. I think there's going to be a lot of Raiders. There's a lot of Raiders fans in LA. They're going to flock their way to Inglewood, go to this game. And I think, they're starting to build up hype. There's still a path for them in the playoffs. They could run the table here. Their schedule isn't that bad going forward. They have a, last week of the season game against the Chiefs. But, at that point, Chiefs might be resting starters, and you could make your way in against Chad Henne and the Chiefs. So we'll see what happens there. But for this game specifically, I've loved what I've seen from Josh Jacobs, the NFL's leading rusher. Again, like I told you, he would expose that Chargers team. He didn't believe me, but it happened. And this defense has been playing very well recently, getting after the quarterback. They're starting to figure things out. And Josh McDaniels, his seat's getting a little colder as these weeks go on. As we say, winning fixes everything. And I think they win this game, Laraib. I'm going to say it's going to be close because this Rams game plays it close, but I'm going to have it Raiders 26, Rams 20. It pushes the spread.
Yeah, Lewis, I think the big matchup in this game is going to be Devontae Adams versus Jalen Ramsey. And, Devontae has played really, really well this season. He did a lot of touchdowns. Him and Derek Carr, they just had an outstanding connection all the way from college. And in this game, Jalen Ramsey's been exposed the past couple of weeks by Mike Evans, DK Metcalf. A lot of guys have been scoring touchdowns on him, Lewis. Olave, yeah. So, I think Devontae Adams comes out and the Raiders come out big on this one. Last week, divisional game, so of course they're going hard against the Seahawks. But now, short week, a lot of guys out. We'll see how Sean McVay gets these guys ready for a Raiders team that's hungry to get into the playoffs, Lewis. And so I like the Raiders 27-17.
All right, well, that's going to do it for this week's episode of the First and Goal podcast. Great week of games, and we'll have our Week 14 predictions and previews dropping this Thursday, so look out for that one as we go forward. As always, our socials and all of our links are in the bio below, so make sure you check those out. Anything else you got for us, Laura, before we head out?
No, I think this is going to be the First and Goal podcast signing off.
Peace.